Good afternoon passengers, welcome to Martel Air. My name's Amanda and I'll be your pilot for today. We're just beginning boarding for flight number 13 from Temora to Goulburn, so grab your seats while I finish up the last steps of the pre-flight inspections of this Cessna Grand Caravan, the pride of the Martel Air fleet. Before engine start checklist. Pre-flight inspection complete. Parking brake handle set. Electrical system switches off. Ignition switch normal. Fuel tank selectors both on. Bleed air heat switch off. Power lever idle. Prop RPM to max. Fuel condition to cutoff. Fuel shut-off knob verify in. Check. Battery switch on. Cabin lights on. Cockpit lighting set. Flaps up. No smoking light on. Before engine start checklist complete. The weather today is cold, windy and trying its very best to be wet. Seems to have just passed us over, but it will be coming back, I'm sure. And we'll be cruising at an altitude of 8 to 10,000 feet en route, flying over the towns of Wombat and Yass, for reasons that will become apparent. Your cabin crew today is me, and your emergency exits are located to the back of the cabin where you entered the plane. I also have a door up here by me, and if you see me leave, please follow me quickly. Our in-flight catering services are provided by our wonderful passengers, so I hope you pack something interesting. Engine start checklist. Battery switch on. Let's see here. Beacon light on. Avionics 1 on. Bus volts check. Emergency power lever normal. Inertial separator handle to bypass. EIS readings check. Propeller area clear. Fuel boost switch on. Fuel boost on check. Fuel pressure low not shown check. Fuel flow 0 check. Starter switch start. Ignition on check. Oil PSI check. NG stable. Fuel condition lever low idle. Fuel flow check. NG climbing. NG stable. Starter switch off. EIS readings check. Generator load check. Battery amps charging check. Fuel boost switch normal. Avionics 2 on. And nav lights on. Engine start checklist complete. We're now ready for departure, so please fasten your seatbelts and turn off your devices, apart from those used to watch this stream. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay. Before departure taxi checklist. Taxi lights on. Seatbelt light on. Taxi clearance. What runway am I using? Oof. I will take runway 36 despite all of that. Crosswind, which will be fun. Temora traffic, Martel 13 is taxiing to runway 36 for takeoff. Okay, taxi clearance check. Nav source set. Prop RPM minimum. Fuel condition low idle. Inertial separator to bypass. Parking brake release. Before departure taxi checklist complete. Okay, check that we're cleared of taxi. That guy gets out of the way. Okay. Wait for these people who want to stand on the airport apron and get mints to decide what they're doing. Turns out that turning somebody into salsa is bad for your propeller and for your insurance, despite their very best efforts to make it happen. Thank you. It's one of the most fascinating things about Microsoft Flight Simulator is the ground crew behaviour. I have turned down the number of vans and buses that will be showing up on the airport apron as compared to how it used to be going, just because that got ridiculous. But it's still been a little bit wild. And speaking of wild, there is some weather. Now, nobody has announced any landings, takeoffs or other movements on the Temora runways, but we double check the traffic in both directions anyway, because we'll be spending a little bit of time on the runway as we backtrack to get the full length of the runway, and now entering the runway, we want strobes and landing lights on for safety, maximize our visibility. Nice tight turn with directional braking. Temora traffic, Martel 13 taking off runway 36 for departure to the east. Okay, before takeoff checklist, parking brake set, altimeter QNH set, standby flight instruments check, fuel boost switch normal, fuel tank selectors both on, fuel quantity check, fuel shut-off knob in, standby alt power on, anti-ice system not required, inertial separator, we'll keep it in bypass for now, autopilot, altitude bug set for 8,000. Check. Flight level change mode engage, set to the Y. Heading mode engage, set to runway heading, bank mode engaged, nav source check, transponder on alt, flaps to takeoff position, takeoff clearance check, strobe lights check, landing lights check, seatbelt light check, parking brake release, fuel condition high idle, prop RPM to max. Before takeoff checklist complete. Okay, ready for takeoff. And we've got a bit of a crosswind for this one, so adding the power gently as aerodynamic effects start to kick in, and we come into the air. Oof. And that crosswind, is peaking up to 20 knots as we get above the runway. The joys of uncontrolled runways with bad taxiways. The on-ground reports had that more like 10 rather than 20. But we got off fairly safely, and we are in the sky. And we start our bank towards where we're going. And we keep a close eye on this weather. And at this point I will engage the autopilot. Nav mode set for once we pick that up. Oh, 19 knot headwind and a 17 knot crosswind as we come up out of here. Jinkies. Flaps coming up. And I think in this situation we will keep the landing lights on a little bit longer to maintain visibility. And as always, I'm joined by Wing Commander Lamington, who will be keeping an eye on the instruments and keeping an eye on my behaviour so that if I get too distracted with speaking, even if there's not currently any passengers listening, if I get too distracted with the ramblings, then Wing Commander Lamington will get me back on track. One of those rare occasions of getting to fly through clouds with water in them. This is amazing, and visually the most dull thing I can possibly think of. The joys of the fact that all of these streams started in a nice bright Australian summer, and it's now, let's see, start of May, which is the last month of autumn. Because of course, living and flying in the southern hemisphere means that my seasons are the right way round rather than this nonsense where December to February is winter. That's just backwards. And also Australia measures seasons purely by the months. I don't know if that's too widely known. I know that in America there are specific dates within a month that say what the official season is, and sometimes a groundhog is involved. Australia just does it by the months, which does mean that summer is technically a few days shorter because it's got February in it, and being an Australian summer, I think we're all glad of that. Is a bit of a slow climb out of the airport and into the distance because, I mean, we've got quite some weather here, and in fact I'm going to take us back to heading mode and just sneak us around one side of this storm. I don't think we need to be going right through the very edge of it when we could be going right past the very edge of it. That's just responsible. And now that I'm actually away from the airport, Centre, Martel 13 is type Cessna Caravan, 7 miles east of Temora, 7,000 feet. Squawk 1356, Martel 13. Roger, Martel 13. And now we are in contact with air traffic control for the region, just to make sure. And because visibility here is approximately no, but we do get the lovely sight of drops of, let's hope it's water, flicking past in the lights from the landing lights. Let's see here. Outside air temperature is now freezing, so pitot-static heat on. Stall heat on. Going to 119.5 Martel 13. Goodbye. Melbourne Centre, Martel 13, 8,000 feet. So we are at our 8,000 foot cruise, and there is a lot of weather around us. Some traffic out here. what I need to see if I can see. 3 o'clock, 4 miles, 7,100 feet. I cannot see them. But it's entirely possible that they have now passed by on the other side, given Melbourne Centre, Martel 1-3 does not have the traffic in sight. They asked for the report if the traffic's in sight, and the traffic is not in sight, so we report that. And we are now outside of that bank of storm, but I think we might go to 10,000 to just be a little bit more above it. Now, this is the first stream in a while where I've not had any passengers awake to chat to, which is a bit of a difference, so we will see how long my rambling lasts. But it's also the first stream after a couple of weeks missed. So, the first one of those two was the expected week away, which I was planning on pre-recording a stream for, but then all the preparations for that weekend away, or the full week away, but you know, the weekend where I was going to be recording, it turned out that I had way too much to do to get ready for the week away itself, and I just got completely behind. So, I'm sorry that the checklist special has had to be delayed, but I'm sure we will find time for it at another point. And then last week's stream, on my trip away, I managed to catch my first ever dose of the spicy, trendy cough. That trend from about 2020 that I've managed to avoid so far. So, you know, I'm behind the times, but I'm proud of having avoided it for as long as I did. Because with all of my other health things, it rather kicked me around. So I am mostly recovered, and unlike last Saturday, I actually have my voice. But yeah, so unfortunately I wasn't able to record or stream anything last week because I was exhausted and my voice was made of gravel. I did not enjoy this experience. I don't recommend this experience. But combination of the vaccinations and antivirals for impact reduction meant that I got through it okay, even if I managed to take my immune suppressant meds the morning of the day where I ended up testing positive, so that's not the best option, but I'm through it now, and I'm back to streaming and talking into the void as there are just passengers asleep in the back, asleep and invisible, nobody talking to me in chat. Oh well, so tragic. It does rather change the feel of things. So you know, to those listening in the recorded version who weren't able to make it, that's entirely fine, but please know that you were missed. And one thing that you might just be able to see is that just above my head on the feed, I've managed to work out how to cleanly embed the YouTube chat. So instead of the later recorded versions being entirely lacking context for what I'm replying to when I'm replying to things, it will actually show the last however many chat messages, which I've been trying to work out how to do that for essentially the entire history of the stream, and I managed to find the way to do it. It's a little trick. It's about 7 little tricks in OBS and in the YouTube API that I had to stack in exactly the right order, but now we have it. So on those streams where I've actually got people talking to me, you will be able to see messages in the chat just scrolling above my head. And that is at least a nice little check of the system working, which I only have a preview that is about this big, but it's good to see that the messages are staying there and popping up. Now, the first place that we're flying over today is a town called Wombat. We are flying over the town of Wombat because I was working out the route for today's flight. Oh, and look at the break in the clouds. Wombat itself seems to be entirely wet at the moment. The clouds reaching to the ground means that it is in fact rain. -3 outside and going in and out of clouds. I think I'm keeping this plane in its anti-icing configuration. And with the rambling, I forgot to set up for cruise, so we were in fact at climb thrust for that entire ramble. Not the best decision. Just watching the numbers here as I tweak everything to 89% NG and 1750 RPM. Ooh, and get sudden hiccups. But yeah, so the reason we are flying over the town of Wombat is that I was looking over the map and spotted the name Wombat just sitting out in the middle of nowhere, as most of the rural New South Wales is just it is just an expanse of the middle of nowhere. Said with love. And I just saw the name Wombat, and it was not quite on the route, but close enough. So I've been looking into it. Wombat was established in 1865 and has a population of 225. It is tiny. It is... Although, the Wombat Hotel, which in Australia, in older towns and villages, like, for example, Wombat, in fact, even in the newer ones, hotel means pub, tavern, inn. Inn would actually be the best equivalent, purely on the... the hotel is... Well, an inn is a drinking establishment with rooms. A tavern does not have rooms. And a pub is a public house, as in somebody's actual house front room made public for selling excess beer that they've made. Well, ale. This is all... these are all medieval definitions that are no longer relevant or true, but useful for Dungeons and Dragons. And hotel is used a lot in Australia. It's also used for the, the fancy icing effects. Windscreen icing. Nifty. I'm distractible. Hotel is used for the fancy temporary accommodation places, but it is also used for the country town's drinking hole with some rooms to rent if you need it. I mean, often it's just used for the place with a bar, but I've not actually checked if they're all equipped with rooms to rent. That's not actually required, despite being heavily implied. This is a tangent on a tangent. Where was I? The Wombat Hotel, beautiful name, has had a continuous liquor license since 1877, making it the longest continually licensed established in New South Wales, which is a very Aussie thing to have achieved and be proud of. I find that delightful. We are just skirting through some of the rain clouds here just to make our pass over the town of Wombat with its century and a half. Wow, yeah, 1877 is 150 years in 3 years. So the town of Wombat, with 225 odd people and a sesquicentennial pub, we'll just make our little flyover of that, and then we will exit the clouds and hopefully actually head away from all of this storm and ice and head on to our next waypoint in the town of Yass. This is my first time encountering properly interesting weather, including some icing in daytime on live weather. I've done a few practice and recreational flights where I've artificially set it to snowstorms and the like, but having just live know the weather out here is kind of grim. That's a fun little addition. Now, we have been mostly operating in the southeastern corner of Australia for all of these streams so far, and that's actually not going to be changing just yet. I'm actually flying us back in general towards Canberra, which, as previously discussed, I've decided Canberra is the base of operations for Martel Air Freight, which will be flying the de Havilland Caribou that I have been working on a livery for. So I think the Caribou livery is in fact just about ready to go live at this point. So once we make it back to Canberra, which we'll probably do Goulburn to Canberra via something interesting on next week's stream, which I believe will be a 4 PM stream compared to this week's noon stream, just because of other commitments lining up that take me to 3 o'clock. But the next flight after we reach Canberra is going to be a longer one, because we will be doing Canberra to Gubbo Island to Canberra in the de Havilland Caribou. So we will get to test the short dirt strip landing capabilities of the Caribou with a very full cargo bay. We will park there, we will empty the cargo bay, not refuel because that is an island with a lighthouse on it, not an airport. So we will take in the fuel that we need to get back, and we will then test the short field takeoff capabilities, because once we've landed on Gubbo Island, we also need to be able to take off from there as well. So yes, I've decided that for the roleplay of these flights, the Caribou is based in Canberra, and we need to. So the cargo flights will be flying out and back to somewhere remote and interesting, because if it's not remote or difficult or weird to get to, Why would you hire a caribou instead of a truck? And I have been practicing with the caribou as well. It is an interesting one to fly because you might notice that at the moment I have everything going on autopilot. The caribou has no autopilot. The caribou has the ability to trim so that it takes only minor corrections to fly straight and level. But even if you've got it perfectly balanced on all of the trims, if you get a gust of wind hitting the plane and it has an absolutely enormous tail, that gust of wind, yeah, sorry, it's the caribou is now tipping over away from that gust of wind, or into the gust of wind, depending on how it hits. So you need to be constantly monitoring, correcting, checking. When I've been flying the caribou and my concentration's drifted a little bit, such as it does when I am rambling like this, so that's going to be an interesting challenge. But sometimes if it just gets tipped slightly, it will just kind of nice and stately hold that roll, and 20 seconds of distraction, and suddenly we're pointed away from where we were going instead of towards it. Not crashing or anything, but just not pointed the way we were meant to. So that's going to be an interesting challenge, doing essentially a 2-hour round trip with chatting to the stream and flying manually. I am probably going to get exhausted doing this, and real pilots of the caribou do describe it as flying all day ends up being exhausting and a workout. And the GPS, or the navigation systems, the caribou in Flight Sim has been upgraded with a GPS, but the GPS essentially acts like the non-directional beacons from radio navigation. So you'll have an instrument on the dash in front of you that's basically like the circular compass thing on the primary flight display of this glass cockpit, where you just get this arrow. So you'll have one pointed like this, and it will tell you, oh yeah, no, you need to be going this way to get to the thing that you've told it to listen to. So instead of all of this lovely, it plots your path and will fly you along it, the GPS navigation for this will just tell you, oh yeah, the place you've told me about is in that direction. And it'll give you, it gives you the arrow on the, I should not have been fiddling with that because that is what controls navigation mode. I'm distractible. So, it will tell you, you need to be flying this direction to get to the thing you've told me to point at. And it has a second thing, will just give you 4 little bits of data. It will give you the name of the waypoint, usually airport. So at the moment, for the actual destination of this flight, it would be saying YGLB. It will give you the range in nautical miles. It will give you the magnetic bearing towards that, as in point the plane this way to get there, minus crosswinds. And it'll give you your ground speed, which ground speed is one of the few things that you really can't do with any onboard instruments that are purely on board, because you're not anywhere near the ground ideally. So at the moment we're doing 125.5 knots through the air, but the true air, so that's indicated airspeed, but we're at 10,000 feet, so the air's a little thinner. So our true airspeed, which you can also calculate because it's maths from the air pressure in several different instruments. True airspeed is actually 145, 146 knots. So that's how fast we're going through the air. But the air is going 13, 14 knots backwards and 19 knots sideways. So our ground speed is 138 knots. And you can only get that from GPS or other not inside your plane measurements, because ground down there, not up here. Try to keep it that way except when landing. Yes, it will be a lot of fun to have a not glass cockpit, so fully analog cockpit other than that one little display panel from the GPS. It does have a, small Garmin GS430 panel on the center console, kind of down where you'd put a cup holder. Down there between the armrests for programming destinations, but you can't see it while flying unless you're getting your eyes completely away from the instruments, which is not always a great idea in a completely manual plane. I'll be doing a lot of rambling about the Caribou when we actually go to fly it, by the way. But yes, so it's going to be an interesting one to try to fly on stream as my distractibility really gets tested. And Wing Commander Lamington is going to have a lot to do to keep me on task for that. But hopefully the pressure of actually performing for the public will be enough to keep me going with that. The most fascinating thing about not having anybody in the chat is that I have this... I'm 90% sure that I've got the stream set up correctly. Like, it's saying it's streaming and all this sort of stuff. YouTube says it's got excellent signal from my computer to their servers. But there's this lagging thought at the back of my head that I'm just showing the now boarding loading screen or something, and just talking to myself even more than you'd think. It's a weird little moment. I miss you, people in chat. The joys of a tiny stream channel after a couple of weeks missed. And now we are between cloud layers, and neither of them are trying to drop everything on us. Although there is that cluster out to the front there that I hope we're not going to be hitting. May need to do some navigation to not hit that. I may be hitting that. That looks chunky. Being at 10,000 feet and the tallest mountain in Australia being 7.5-ish, I can at least say that it's not cumulogranite. That is the most scary type of cloud. But that cloud bank there looks chewy. Now, since I can't be asking any questions to the chat, I will just pose this question to commenters in general, if anybody watches the recording after the fact. What sort of things do you want to see out of the stream? Like, what sort of flights? We've been having the Mandy rambles while holding on nice sensible flights, which the airshow special on the last stream was a nice break, and might do that occasionally, but it was a little more exciting than I think is my usual preference. And the occasional longer cargo flight streams should be a nice break. But do people have preferences between the different types of flights that I've done / planned? Other types of flight that they'd like to see me try? I'm open to suggestions, because I am largely doing this for the notion of entertaining people and giving them something to either have fun watching or find useful for body doubling while having it on in the background and just having my ramblings for company. That's something that a few people have said that they enjoy. But yeah, if there's something that would make this more interesting, enjoyable, useful, or even if there's just topics you'd like me to ramble about, if I've got a week to research something in preparation for a stream, then I can research something in preparation for a stream and we'll see what happens. Now, I am looking at this weather and I think we might do our overflight of Yass below this weather. That should be fun. So, the town of Yass, which is the second of our little destinations on the way through, on our way to Goulburn, just to make it more interesting than just a point-to-point flight, and to give me something to talk about other than my own disintegrating mind. And luckily, being a VFR flight, we don't need anybody's double checks and permissions to change our altitude. We just need to pay some attention and not go crunch into anything. But yes, the town of Yass, much bigger than Wombat. It's just shy of 7,000 people in the last census. It's an hour-ish drive north of Canberra. So you do get some people who live in Yass and work in Canberra because, country town levels of housing costs rather than full urban housing costs. But while Canberra was established in 1913, Yass was established in 1837. It is much older than the big city that gets all the attention just near it. And with the in-flight entertainments that I've been doing on all but the last couple of streams, with the poems by Banjo Patterson apparently moved to the Yass area at the age of 7 and spent the rest of his childhood there, so that is a fun little connection. And we are coming out of the bottom of the clouds. No, we are hanging at the bottom of the clouds. Let's do 5,400 feet instead of 6,000. There we go, and we can see Yass nestled into some hills here. And the Hume Highway, which is essentially the major Melbourne to Sydney highway that also goes, relevant to me, it's the one that goes past Canberra. And leveling off power. There we go. So yes, it's a nice little town. I've had several times where I tried to go past Yass and my tyres exploded. Or other car... No, one was a tyre exploding at 110 kilometers an hour, and one was the gearbox entirely seizing shut. But yes, trying to drive past Yass has proved to be bad luck for me, which is just amusing. And so, the reason that I chose Yass for one of our destinations to fly over for this stream is in fact, again, the name of the town. So, the town of Yass. Y-A-S-S. It's a fairly typical medium town in the countryside. So, you know, it has the expected sort of amenities overall. You know, we've got some lovely sporting fields there. There's the Yass River coming through. There's a swimming pool, I think. All of that sort of stuff. And there is, of course, a McDonald's. The McDonald's is, I think, one of Yass's more internationally noted claims to fame. Because the sign advertising McDonald's Yass was, look, I'm almost certain they did it on purpose. McDonald's Yass. Now, we know that the McDonald's Corporation loves their consistent branding. I'm just going to do some orbits of Yass just while I ramble about this. McDonald's loves their consistent branding, don't they? They've got that Golden Arches logo. They love to... You don't even need to say McDonald's, you just put up the Golden Arches logo. And if you're advertising a branch of McDonald's, and like there's only one in the town, you just need to put up the Golden Arches logo and the name of the town. And possibly, you know, it's on this highway, the town is this far away, that sort of extra information that makes for a lovely sort of sign. It's very, very normal. Like, you know, the ones that say M. Goulburn on the Hume Highway or the Federal Highway. Very standard sorts of signs. Does not work for Yass. I'm almost certain it was intentional. But that sign does not work for Yass. A picture of it, picture of this sign, circulated the internet for quite a while. Unfortunately, the sign has been taken down by now, which is just tragic. But yeah, so the Golden Arches logo, it's a big M. It's just the M in McDonald's, we know this. And town name, Yass. So, M-Y-A-S-S. This was a choice. This was, I am almost perfectly certain, a deliberate choice. And, you know, it's the sort of choice that gets them advertising, because I'm talking about it. The sign is long gone, but I'm talking about Yass McDonald's, you know, for free at the moment. I'm not endorsing or condemning it one way or the other. I'm just mentioning that there was a sign with letters as big as, like, it's a nice short town name too, so standard billboard, you can fit those letters big. So, M, Yass, open 24 hours. They knew what they were doing. They were proud of what they were doing. So yes, that is the town of Yass and its memorable McDonald's. And getting us back to the autopilot path after that bit of digression. And I think I will take us back above the cloud layer again. That was more comfortable. Let's go for 9,000. And the other thing that delights me about the name of the town of Yass is the other uses in, let's go with slang or patois or the like. So, my medieval group, the SCA, which, you know, it's all over the world, mostly in the US, but we have it in Australia too. Every 6 months we hold a tournament to find the next crown, so king and or queen. We have had a pair of kings. It's usually a king and a queen, so the person who wins the tournament is the sovereign, and the person in whose honour they were fighting is the crown consort. So it is almost exclusive. It is, you know, the way physical contests tend to go, especially when there's a whole cultural thing behind them as well that I won't get into because I don't want to swear. It's usually been a king winning for a queen. But there have been cases where there has been a queen who has won the tournament and, you know, ruled and had a, you know, queen by right of arms and king of grace and courtesy. It used to be phrased as grace and beauty, when it was almost always queens by grace and beauty, but Lockhart has not had any queens by right of arms yet, which is the Australian New Zealand group. But I say yet. There's a few people of whom I have hopes. And the next one of these tournaments in the Australian New Zealand group, Lockhart, is going to be held in the place mundanely known as Yass. And I think that this would be a perfect place for our first victory of a queen by right of arms, because then we could, as is right and proper, go Yass, queen. This joke is dreadful, and you're welcome. And yes, I did make this flight detour via Yass purely to be able to share the McDonald's Yass sign and the Yass Queen joke. And I find that the more setup and explanation a joke takes, the funnier it is to tell. It might not be the funnier it is to hear, but that's your problem. I'm having fun. And as we climb away from Yass and back towards our trip to Goulburn, we have another about 20 minutes left before we arrive in Goulburn. And the seatbelt light has stayed on for this entire flight because look at this weather, it's ridiculous. And you know, it's not like having all of the passengers strapped down has helped me retain any of them in the chat, but this is the way that it goes. I'm just trying to think of if I have anything interesting to tell you about Goulburn as we approach Goulburn. This is difficult because one of the earliest flights was to Goulburn. Oh, there's that cloud I was worried about. Don't like that. Nope, 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 nope. It's not actively dropping weather on things, which is something. I was talking to you about Goulburn, and the fact that I think it was might have been the second stream, we went to Goulburn, and the 50-foot tall concrete sheep. I said many things about the 50-foot tall concrete sheep in the town of Goulburn, and I also said the words 50-foot tall concrete sheep more times than was necessary, because there is something very linguistically satisfying about the phrase 50-foot tall concrete sheep. Especially when the sheep in question is in fact 50 feet tall and made of concrete. So I think I did most of my interesting Goulburn facts on that stream. But we will see what is what as we get a little bit closer. Let's get to 10,000 just because. $9,000 seems to be just brushing the tops of the clouds, which is never comfortable. So, on the topic of flying the Caribou, which I was rambling about before we got to Yass, I think, in one of my recreational / practice flights the other day, I in fact took the Caribou from Canberra to Adelaide. That is a 4-hour flight in a Caribou. And, as mentioned, no automation. Hand stays on the joystick. In the Caribou, it is a big chunky yoke rather than a joystick, because most planes, in fact, have a yoke, because those are much easier to wire up directly to physical controls. But hand stay on the controls for 4 hours, and I didn't use any pausing or anything. It was just keep enough attention on the plane for 4 hours that here's that cloud. Let's see how this goes. Yeah, keep enough attention on the controls for 4 hours that you have a bit of a time of things. So 4-hour flight, Canberra to Adelaide. I will not be doing that as a 2-way flight on stream. That would be a bit much. I will save the 8-hour streams for when we're trying to take the Caravan to New Zealand, which will also be a little bit adventurous. Set back up for cruise while also watching this weather. The proper volumetric cloud simulation is rather delightful. One of my favourite things when passing any sorts of clouds is just looking at how these white smudges are actually full 3D structures, and the fact that Flight Sim is now actually capable of that. It's just rather joyful. And there is apparently a plane 1 o'clock, 3,000 feet above us. Yeah, Melbourne Centre, Martel 1-3, traffic not in sight due to cloud. But we are now out the other side of that cloud already. What a joy. Still can't see them, of course. On the simulated air traffic control, they reported being able to see us just fine because the AI is a dirty cheater, as every gamer knows. There's no way they could see us through those clouds, no matter how bright our lights are. But anyway, I'm quite sure that there's at least 2 tangents that I've gotten part way through and gotten distracted from by other tangents or by in-game events and just completely blanked on. So since there's nobody in the chat to remind me what they were, you'll just have to enjoy the mystery of what I was going to say. Although I must say that after a couple of weeks of missing the streams, it is rather enjoyable to get back to chattering away while flying sensibly in Flight Sim. The sensibleness of it is just very relaxing, and the chattering away is just good practice for being able to talk to people, which, you know, I don't have a problem with. That's because I surround myself with the sort of people who don't mind being info-dumped at. If people don't understand that an info dump is basically one of the love languages for autistic people, then that's their problem. When I'm oversharing interesting facts, it's not that I think you don't know them, it's that I'm excited to know them and I think you might be excited to know them too. So, you know, if I happen to get distracted by telling you about the inner mechanics of the Bronze Age collapse or similar, or, you know, why Aeneasir the copper merchant did nothing wrong as far as anybody can prove, then that is just me, as somebody who enjoys collecting facts, trying to share some of my collection with people. And if you're not going to take that as a positive thing, yeah, there are other people who will. I'll spend my time with them instead. Which, you know, sounds very dismissive, but it's actually just the sort of people who deserve you will like you for being you, not for not being you. So find the ones who deserve you. That got unexpectedly positive and affirmation-y. I don't know why. This is what happens when I'm left for an hour to ramble into the void. Hello, the void. My favourite type of the void is cats. Black cat sitting in a slightly shadowed spot, possibly on some nice soft black furniture, where you stare into the void and the void stares back because there's 2 eyes just open in the void. The void wants chicken. Meow. And we are getting closer to Goulburn. In fact, I think we might start our descent in towards Goulburn. So we switch to the Goulburn traffic chat, and with no knowledge of, I think, yeah, I don't know which runway we actually want for the Goulburn Airport. I'm gonna look up some charts. This is one of the fun things about how I fly this, in that I could just straight up use the proper proper airport charts, and it looks like 04/22 is the actual runway, and the other offering of 08/26 is a tiny dirt strip. We don't want that one. And we are coming in such that 04 will be the best one based on current wind conditions. So Goulburn traffic, Martel 13 is 9 miles west, 10,000 feet, inbound to land, runway 04. Set up for RNAV runway 04. Attention passengers, we're now approaching Goulburn, and the seatbelt sign is still on, as it has been throughout the entire flight, which means I'd like you to fasten your seatbelts if for some reason they have been unfastened. Enjoy this riddle and more as we come in towards landing, and thank you again for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Approach checklist. Seatbelt lights on, fuel tank selectors both on, fuel condition high idle, prop RPM to max, flaps to approach, landing lights on, inertial separator is in bypass, and brakes are off. And hopefully soon we'll be coming out of this bank of cloud and we'll be able to see the actual airport. We're coming in on an RNAV approach, which is like the fancy instrument landing system approaches, but entirely based on the GPS, which is a fun little thing for smaller airports, especially where getting a full set of antennas set up is way too expensive. And I like to get that onto a relative terrain mode just in case. So we have a glide slope altitude information already set up for us, and I can see that we are well above the glide slope that we need to be on. So we will fly away from the airport initially, and we are set for 3,600 feet. Oh, and we are coming out of cloud, which is lovely. And it looks like it is mostly just overcast, which I enjoy, because landing into full spicy rain would be more of a challenge than I think I am quite awake for. That is ascending a little faster than I'm happy with. So we've got the descent speed set to hold a particular number of knots, so we control the descent rate with the throttle. And I think we will stop at 4,000. That's looking like the plan. Yeah. And turn our course back towards the airport, as we are below the glide slope, but we are also no longer descending. So being below the glide slope is good. And we get navigation mode back on. The yaw damper. Nice big circle, getting everything lined up. Heading set along the runway. And nav mode has taken hold. So this is a slightly chaotic approach. airport in sight. We are off to one side. That will be corrected. Cross track of 0.66 nautical miles. But we are coming back on and arm the approach mode. So once the glide slope comes down to meet us, we will start flying along it. Okay. Final approach checklist. Seatbelt light on. Flaps. Land. Then controlling the airspeed as we come in towards our approach. So, runway is in sight. We are less than 1 dot to the left, less than 1 dot low, which means we are about to capture the glide slope. And we are sitting on our approach speed. We're currently holding approximately 10 knot headwind, which means it's the correct runway, and 10 to 15 knot very unstable crosswind, which means it's going to be spicy. And we've captured the glide slope, and we are on the localizer, or the simulated localizer from the GPS. There's the L/VNav, I'm pretty sure is lateral/vertical navigation. So, LNav is controlling side to side, and VNav is controlling uppy-downy. And double checking all of our config, that is full flaps, full RPM, full fuel, no warning messages. Now, the fun thing about this approach for us right now. Goulburn traffic, Martel 13 is on final runway 04 to land. The fun thing about this approach is that with that 15 knot crosswind and we're currently doing 105, we usually aim to land at about 80 to 85. We're not actually pointed towards the runway, just so that we can fly towards the runway. Because that wind wants to push us sideways, so we have to point the other sideways, enough to counteract that. But once the wheels hit the ground, we need to not be doing that. So, coming off the autopilot about here, but using the guidance from that GPS version of ILS, where it's still telling me the direction I should be pointing. But essentially, I need to use the rudder to control the direction of the plane, or the direction of the nose, such that the plane is moving towards the point on the runway. Oh, and as we get a little closer to the ground, some of the crosswind drops off, which means that we start needing to point more towards the runway, but not too much more. Ooh, bumpy. And we are coming in kind of fast on this approach, purely because I want to counteract some of that crosswind so that it is less of the total vector. But it's going well. It's going well. once the wheels touch, I need to be pointing such that the wheels are forwards. Flaps up for weight on wheels. And that was dreadful. So that is called, we did not get any real ground contact. Goulburn traffic, Martel 13 is going around. That was stressful. So we ran out of runway there. Basically what happened is that I could not get the plane firmly on the ground such that the brakes would do anything for me, and even going into a full reverse on the prop was basically not slowing us down. And yes, that go around was badly done, but it also didn't involve a crash, which if I had not applied full power and then also applied uppies, yeah, that would have been a runway overrun crash, which those are embarrassing, messy, unpleasant. I don't think I swore any point during that, which is at least something. So, you know, as has been stated before, the thing to do when you have a situation that is not suitable for continuing the landing is you don't continue the landing. And that crosswind is spicy, and that runway is short. So to make that stick properly, I essentially need to be hitting very early on the runway, and which, you know, earlier than I would normally aim, because if you aim for landing on the numbers, as it's called, right at the base of the runway, if you land slightly short of where you planned, you miss the runway. Whereas if you aim a little ways down, you hit earlier than you planned, but still on the runway. That was exciting. Didn't enjoy that. Okay. Heading sync to this. Altitude set. Autopilot on. So, just getting the autopilot back on. And lining up for another attempt at that. So, this next one is going to be what we call a positive landing. A positive landing is one where you put the wheels down a little more firmly than some people in the cabin might enjoy. And the point of that is you put the things with brakes on onto the surface. So, if you ever get a landing, especially in bad weather, if you're in an airliner and the landing in bad weather feels a bit more hard than you'd like, that's not them being incompetent, that is them landing well within the safety margins and just making absolutely sure that they get weight on the wheels so that the brakes on the wheels can do something. So, you know, it's actually good when they do that because it means that they're paying attention to the conditions. It's just, you know, a bit of a bump. That's not all hard landings, of course. It is also entirely possible to have a hard landing that is because they screwed up slightly. But just remember that planes are expensive and pilots also don't want to die. Okay. Flaps to approach. Holding out 4400. And you might have noticed some warning messages while I was doing that go around, and the thing there is that those were like, you have pushed the engine harder than you should push this engine messages. And the thing about those is that you are allowed to push the engine quite hard briefly. Just so long as you understand that you're doing that for a purpose. Now, in this case, that purpose was not crashing. It would have been worse for the engine to crash. So, we have captured the localizer, and we're just turning that. Let's turn off the bank limiter just to make sure this happens nicely. Runway is in sight. Flaps. Flaps to landing. Up on the glide slope. Okay, heading mode is set to the runway heading if we should need it. That was stressful. Okay, and we have captured the glide slope. And set up on the approach again. Despite my comments about keeping the speed a little higher on the last one, we've got landing flaps, so that we had less deflection. On this one, I am going to be accepting that that was probably me making a mistake, and try coming in with less speed such that we can plant this thing on the runway harder. Now, on larger planes, you will have a thing called ground spoilers, which are extra panels on the top of the wings that pop up when you're on the ground to completely destroy the wing's ability to make lift. And they are set up to automatically deploy once the weight on wheel switches get any pressure on them. And the weight on wheel switches are exactly what they sound like. They are switches that trigger when there's weight on the wheels. Very useful thing for the plane's automation to be able to tell. winds are at basically perfectly 45 degrees. This is not ideal landing conditions. Goulburn traffic, Martel 13 is on final runway 04 to land. So, the goal on this landing is to put the wheels down firmly and to put the speed to 0 while remaining on the ground and on the runway. The winds are varying a lot and coming in with still varying 8 to 15 knot crosswind. Okay. Autopilot off.
500.
And of course that time, absolutely no problem in getting it down onto the runway. One of the fascinating things with crosswind landings is that, as you saw as we got right in close to the ground, it tried to flip us over. That is because when one wing is getting more lift than the other, such as from, well, lift is caused by airspeed, not ground speed. So while they have approximately the same ground speed, the airspeed of the two is can be quite different in those sorts of situations. Goulburn traffic, Martel 13 is clear of the runway. Okay, after landing checklist, strobes off, landing lights off, standby alt power off, taxi lights on. Before taxi checklist, taxi lights on, seatbelt lights on, taxi clearance not here, inertial separator to bypass, RPM to minimum, fuel to low idle. Okay. Before arrival taxi checklist complete. And let's just pull into this lovely little Parking spot here. Parking brake is off. There we go. And we're just going to use this lovely little parking spot here. This guy wants to guide us in. We can do that. And being very careful not to make anybody into chunky saucers. Lovely. Shutdown checklist. Parking brake set. Power lever to idle. Bleed air heat switch off. ITT range is stable. Prop RPM feather. Inertial separator to a normal. Fuel boost off. Fuel condition cut. Lovely. And engine is stopping. Engine has stopped. External lights off. Seatbelt light off. Attention passengers, this now concludes our flight from Temora to Goulburn, and we here at Martel Air hope you've enjoyed your time in our tiny sky bus. Please wait until I've opened the door and you can calmly deplane in an orderly fashion. Our baggage handling services today will be provided by our wonderful passengers, so thank you for not leaving any of your luggage behind. Any personal belongings left behind as you leave the plane will be assumed to be a present to the pilot and co-pilot, and enjoyed thoroughly. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay, and no smoking light off. Cabin lights off. NG is stopped. Check. Avionics 2 off. Avionics 1 off. And battery switch off. Fuel tank selectors both off. Shutdown checklist complete. So that concludes the slightly rambling into the void stream for today. For those of you catching up on the recorded version of the stream, thank you very much. And for those who would normally have been here to give me some company as I ramble into the void, I understand that life is weird and timing is weirder, so please know that you were missed, and I will hopefully see you next time, when we'll possibly be flying Goulburn to Canberra via an interesting point that I will research during the week, and the stream after that, we will be taking the Caribou out for its first official flight, taking at least 3 tons of cargo from Canberra to Garbo Island Lighthouse. This has been Martel Air Flight 13, Stream 14, if we're counting the air show. thank you very much for those of you who've been paying attention, and I'm going to go away now.